from Chalmette Refining actually came shopping with me to pay the bill. And Elizabeth Ellison-Frost, who is one of the people who worked on the booklet that is out on the table, is also with us tonight. I'd like to thank those two ladies very, very much for their generosity and willingness to work with me on this project. This booklet is out on the front table. I'm sure most of you got it, but if you did not, it'll be out there for you to pick up free this evening before you leave. There is also a calendar that is magnetic with some functions coming up in the parish, all the way through May 7th of 2017, so it's awesome. Tonight's lecture is going to be a big part and then a small part. Mr. Ron Chapman, who you all know and love very much, is here to do the crux of the lecture about 100 years of Chalmette refining. His introduction at this point is too long for me to go into. He is a professor here. He's beloved in that role. He is an author. He is a historian. He's a wonderful lecturer and one of our most frequent lecturers. We always make sure we have at least one lecture within the year because he's so good at it. And I love him dearly. Thank you for being here tonight, Ron. Also, Mr. Jared Forstell, who is the manager over at Chalmette Refining, is going to come up after Mr. Chapman to say a little bit about PDF, who is managing the refinery now. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up our main lecturer, Mr. Ron Chapman.
Greetings all. This lecture is a little bit difficult to put together in a way because there's so many elements. So please forgive me, it's going to go like a Russian novel. Anybody's ever read one of those? In the sense that it goes off in different directions and weaves back in. The point being, I'm going to talk initially just about oil discovery in Louisiana. I'm going back to like Stephen Ambrose. I was fortunate to study under Stephen, and he always says, treat it like a Baptist minister. First you tells them what you tells them, and tells them, and tells them what you told them. So that's what I'm doing here. And then we're going to talk about just industry coming into St. Bernard Parish, a little bit about that process. And then from there we'll focus on to Chalmette refining and how this refinery got started and the different owners. And then within that context, kind of the history of each of the individual owners. So you see it's going to be a little bit weird. But with that in mind, I think it's time that we can start going. We're celebrating the 100th anniversary of having a refinery here that was celebrated last year, and that's quite an accomplishment. But if you look back, that goes almost to the origins in many ways of oil. In Louisiana, there's never always a controversy in Louisiana. Can't get anything straight. So there's two stories as to how oil was first discovered in Louisiana. The first story is Jules Chalmette. He had his rice paddy out there, and he saw some bubbles coming up around Lumley Prairie. So he decided to drive a pipe in the ground because he had heard about Spindletop and the amount of money and everything that was flowing into that. So he decided to take a pipe and drive it in the ground where the bubbles were coming up and then light it and see if gas was coming up. I assume he used a wooden mallet that we might not have heard about the Jules Chalmette. But nevertheless, he did that. He noticed the bubbles, it was gas, and there was a mad rush, almost like Sutter's Mill discovering gold, because that's what was happening about that time. And the S.A. Spencer Corporation leased 2,000 acres. They then turned around and found a wildcatter by the name of Scott Haywood. Most of the oil back then were wildcatters on the exploration side. If you remember, Rockefeller was tying up under Standard all the refineries. They formed the Jennings Oil Company, and it didn't take them long at 1,700 feet to hit oil. At which point, a 100-foot column of oil flew up. You didn't have blowout preventers back then. So when you punched a hole in the ground and there was oil and it was under pressurized gas, it came up. And sometimes it was so loud, the actual guys working around the rig were deafened for life by the explosive sounds that the thing made. 7 hours, his entire rice field was covered with oil, and they had to scoop it up off the bottom from there. And it was producing 7,000 barrels a day until it sanded up. This is one story on the first oil. This is showing you what the rig looked like in 1901. This is what a gusher looks like, so you can just see. Sometimes they go up to over 200 feet, and then you end up with this. This is a sea of oil. It's just everywhere. You gotta, I don't know, I have to talk to somebody, but I guess you just scoop it up and put it in barrels, and it was Rockefeller's problem to sort the sand from the oil. But this is in essence, you know, how it was done. The second story goes back a little earlier. It goes back to the 1860s when we were mining for sulfur in Sulphur, Louisiana. That's just digging a vertical hole in the ground. And it comes because, I love this, they saw a bear come out of the woods with oil on its paw. Well, the Indians used to, because oil seeps to the top, you know, you find it in creeks and all sorts of places. The Indians used it as a medicine. We use mercury, so who's to say? So anyway, they went to Shupik Bay and they renamed it Oil Springs after that. They discovered after the oil was really interested and people were generating fascination in the profits of it. A driller named Motorite, he didn't find anything. A Frenchman showed up, he didn't accomplish anything. Until finally the sulfur mining company began. What they were doing was digging a hole and then putting like a coffer dam around it. So they weren't drilling, they were digging for oil. And then finally, you know, they struck the goal that it came in and they were getting all of 25 barrels a day out of that one. So now you have two stories. This predates the other one by 15 years, and that's the sulfur oil field. I assume that must be the hole in the ground above the sun here. Now we're getting into industry in St. Bernard Parish, okay? St. Bernard downriver has always been agriculturally based. The originals were the Islanos who were brought here. And the story on that was Bernardo Galvez was concerned because there weren't 13 American colonies, there were 14, and the 14th was West Florida, which was from the east of the Mississippi River, above Lake Pontchartrain and Maurepas, all the way into Florida itself. And it was under British control and a British governor named Johnstone. The Spanish were worried about the British being there. American Revolution was in full throes about this time, so he brought the Islanos in as soldiers with their families. His father was the governor of the Canary Islands. When these people came, they were farmers, but their idea was to be soldiers. Eventually, Galvez would pull them together in an army to defeat the British in this 14th colony, and that's the American Revolution. Few people realize the important role Spanish Louisiana played in the American Revolution. So anyway, these were the first farmers in the region. It's called St. Bernard because you had Bernard de Galvez, Bernard de Marigny, so why not? Next group is the sugar planters come in, because after, believe it or not, the first sugar was discovered by Manuel Solis here in St. Bernard Parish. He's the first one to refine it. Etienne de Boré opened up his plantation where Audubon Park is. He commercialized it, but the first refining was done in St. Bernard. It became the cash industry, so everybody fled into this area and started building these massive sugar plantations. So at the time of the Battle of New Orleans, if you look, it's just a string of sugar plantations running down the river, okay? Jackson Barracks will be built in 1834 after, you know, the Battle of New Orleans, because the Americans didn't want New Orleans ever threatened again. And then after the Civil War, there was concern about slaves. They were all free. What are you going to do for a labor force? So Louisiana aggressively went to Sicily and tried to enlist as many Sicilians as they could get to come here to start working in the fields, which they did. They worked incredibly hard. A good book on that would be Deep Delta Country. And he talks about how they worked so hard and even worked at night, you know, in their own lands, bought up the land. This college was Mistral tomato fields. Remember, they owned most of the tomato fields around here, and the produce that went into the French market came from St. Bernard Parish. So St. Bernard Parish was traditionally an agrarian culture, okay? But by the 20th century, things started changing. A streetcar line is now running into St. Bernard. Imagine that. 1923, they opened up the Industrial Canal, and then Jackson Barracks ceases to be an army base and becomes a National Guard facility. Industry comes here because of the railroads, the Industrial Canal, the Mississippi River. Attention is now starting to look down the river at St. Bernard Parish as a place for industries to come. The first industry was the Morris Company's stockyard in Araby. Best I can find on that, I think, is the 1860s, the 1870s, when New Orleans said that stockyards couldn't be in the parish limits of Orleans. So rather than moving the Morris stockyards, they moved the boundary closer to the Jackson Barracks. And now, all of a sudden, the stockyards were in St. Bernard Parish. It was okay. 1908, Standard Oil actually came here. The big refinery in Baton Rouge, which at one time would be the largest in the world, was planned for here. What transpired, what changed their mind, we don't know. But they ended up leaving St. Bernard Parish and then deciding to go inland towards Baton Rouge. The next big industry that came in was the American Sugar Refinery in 1909. Today, I think it's either the first or second largest in the world. It's an amazing facility. If you ever get a chance to tour it, I'd suggest you do so. Also, the Violet Canal, which was originally the Lake Bourne Canal, was dug in 1890. There was shipbuilding there. Metal ships. They were building all sorts of things, you know, oil tankers and all sorts of ships were being built. So St. Bernard Parish is starting to become industrialized. And the lands around here that are owned by the Sicilians, and now they're starting to sell some of their property for homes, and businesses, and things of that sort. So this change from agriculture to industry caused some people concern, but others saw tremendous opportunities. It's the same struggle you see in any community. Now, oil comes in. This is building the industrial canal. Isn't that amazing? You see all the trees and everything. This is a direct line. Here's them building the locks. What I love in these pictures is looking in the background. Now, that was actually built on the Dominican nuns' property. So they had to get the whole stretch. They ran all the way to the river to the lake. And I think this is when they dedicated it in 1924. Steamboats, can you imagine that? And then you have an aerial shot here from the lake down here towards the river. I think this is in the 1940s, but look at the area. There's just nothing there. So oil industry comes in. First decade of 20th century was the cusp of some major industrial expansion, discovery of oil, the location of St. Bernard Parish. People looking to build a facility now was starting to focus here near the mouth of the Mississippi River, which is the third largest river in the world. Though Standard Oil moved to Baton Rouge, others see the parish as the place to move. Pelican Oil Refinery, which also comes in here. Then soon after that, you'll have a few drillers come in. They'll come to wildcatters, they call them, to Shell Beach in Louisville City. They'll do some drilling, but they really won't find anything, which I find kind of odd to this day because Plaquemine is covered with oil and gas, so they must be lousy at it. I don't know. They have a little luck too. But then eventually you start getting the first mention of refining starting to come in here, and that's in 1913. That's what it was used for. People were refining it to get kerosene for oil lamps and for cooking, to replace whale oil. Okay? Everything else was kind of like a byproduct. So we have some refinery people here who probably do a better job than me, but it's almost like, you know, you took the kerosene out, it was a trash bucket, and over time people start reaching into the trash bucket and saying, oh, I can use this, and oh, I can use that. Now I don't think there's much trash left in that bucket. We just about use everything that comes out of oil. It's kind of like they say at the slaughterhouse, right? They use everything in the pig with the squeal. Well, it's kind of the same with the oil industry today. The big one was World War I. You say, well, how does that relate? Well, it relates because up to this point, they were using coal in steamships. My father went to sea all of his life. He retired as a chief engineer for Central Gulf, became a port engineer, but he started at 17 stoking coal in steamships going to Cuba. Well, you get to World War I, and Winston Churchill, the First Lord of Admiralty, realized that there's a lot of labor and a lot of trouble and a lot of space with stoking coal. Why don't we go to fuel oil? Once they go to fuel oil, now everybody's starting to use fuel oil, reach in the bucket, start taking out the fuel oil. Now we've got a use for this. So all of a sudden there's this tremendous demand for fuel oil because shipping is becoming very big, especially when there's a war on. Likely, refineries came up, focused from kerosene now to fuel oil, and because of this, the Mississippi River and the Port of New Orleans, the railroad system, Chalmette became a center of focus. Also, New Orleans wouldn't allow any oil refineries in city limits, so that's why you see them in Narco, and you see them here and in Baton Rouge. It's a question of, you know, politics. So here we've got Pelican Oil. October 1913, they announced a new industrial enterprise would be coming in, located a refinery located at the port of Chalmette. Interested investors start coming in. T.C. Anderson, Liberty Refining Company, and several Chicago. So the out-of-state money is what's doing this. October 1915, imagine that, a hurricane. Who'd have thunk it, huh? Put about 10 feet of water across Lower St. Parish. You'd think that would dispel people from coming here, but no. The industry is determined they want to move in, so they continue looking for the refineries and setting themselves up. They purchased the land. If you go into the Voice, several enterprises seeking interest to the parish. Negotiations for sites are well underway. As you read the Voice and go through it, it's really interesting because you go through years of stuff and you see just a mention in the minutes or a mention here and there, and that's how you piece together what's going on with the transactions. A third of this large tract of fine land, measuring approximately 2 miles in width, fronting the river, was sold to an oil company for construction of the biggest oil plant in the South. The site area we're talking about would be the Delaron Plantation, which played such a critical role in the Battle of New Orleans. That was Packingham's forward headquarters, and some say that's actually where his body was brought after he was shot and killed. Negotiations began. They completed with the purchase, and basically they had a little glitch because once they realized they had railroads and pipeline rights, those in the industry will understand, all of a sudden you've got a whole new set of circumstances you've got to deal with in getting permits. So that kind of stalled things for a little bit, but finally they got it going, and they were producing a number of refined products out of the place. In 1915, this refinery is starting to rock and roll. This is the Delaron Plantation in the 1900s. Sad when you see the little bit that's left, and you can see it's like an old barn. It's left in terrible condition. It was one of the most beautiful plantations in the entire southern part of Louisiana. This is what it looked like around 1920s. And of course now it's just a few bricks remaining. This is a map from the Battle of New Orleans, but you can see that the piece of parcel of property we're talking about right on the river here. These here are the plantations. So these were all sugar plantations based on the French long lot system. You bought an arpit across the front, you went 40 arpits to the back, and arpit's 192 feet. Chalmette Oil and Refining Company. You're going to see it starts changing names as different owners take control of it. Chalmette Oil, 1919, according to the police jury minutes, going into the minutes, you see that the Pelican property had been transferred and the name changed to the Chalmette Oil and Refining Company. And all of a sudden, a byproduct, reaching back into that bucket again, they used to put gasoline into the rivers and streams and dump it because they had no use for it until they come up the internal combustion engine and a little guy by the name of Henry Ford sticks them in an automobile and suddenly we've got gasoline. And we have another purpose for refining, so refining now becomes upstaged, it becomes more and more important. 1922, it would change to the Chalmette Petroleum Company. So it's going through these series of changes, but the refinery is a constant. And it's continually getting bigger, safer, and more modern as time goes along. Later, the property of Chalmette would be sold by Louisiana Terminal Company. Apparently, they owned it, they leased it, and then finally the refinery bought it and owned it outright, okay? And therefore, the lease arrangement ended in 1923. You know, they had sole purpose of the property. Chalmette Petroleum Company. Petroleum Magazine in 1922 refers to the Chalmette Petroleum Company as a 750-barrel topping plant. Capacity easily increased, improvements to be made in months. So it's on the move to becoming a bigger facility. It's got a 32-acre site at that time on the Mississippi River. Storage and exporting facility of 300,000 barrels. It's pretty big for those days. Refining capacity of 10,000 barrels a day. Where do you see what today's production is? It's just phenomenal what happens. 2 filling stations. Back then we used to call them also service stations. Remember, they would change your oil, they would check your oil, they'd clean your windshield, check your tires, fill you up with gas, and give you a Saints glass for 17 cents a gallon. The good old days, huh? They were exporting, this is a key element, they were exporting oil to Central and South America. This is going to suddenly dovetail into another business enterprise. Expansions include cracking plant, new lube and topic plants, and a new export facility, which again ties into this. Life magazine will do an article and they reference Chalmette Petroleum, one of 127 refineries providing the best grade gasolines. Back up to there. What the devil is that about? All right, this is where we get into the Russian novel. This is where we go off in strange places and work our way back in again. The Vaccaros. I don't know if anybody's heard of the Vaccaro brothers. Anybody here? Vaccaros were Sicilians living in St. Bernard Parish. Joseph Vaccaro was born in Contessa, Etilinia, Sicily. I probably mispronounced that, and I apologize in advance. 1855. He comes in 1867. Remember, the Civil War ends in 1865. This is when Sicilians are starting to come in to Louisiana. Okay? His brothers Felix and Luca and his sister Maria soon follow him. He would come in first, he'd establish a household, get something done, bring members of his family in. They opened up a business and they started Vaccaro Brothers and Company. They're dealing with produce, okay, and bringing the produce from St. Bernard Parish, both what they grow and what they get from their friends, Sicilian brothers and friends, into the French markets for sale to the businesses and to the community. I don't know about you guys, I remember the old French market. The smells were amazing. It was just a wonderful place. I mean, it was a bonanza of just wonderful fresh food. Salvador de Antoni, I went to school with a Sal de Antoni, arrives in Safalu, Sicily in 1874. He meets with the Vaccaros, he marries his sister. So now you have this whole group together. They're transporting lemons and oranges from St. Bernard Parish into New Orleans. That's their business model. However, in 1899, they have a devastating freeze that wipes everything out. The Vaccaros are extremely industrious people. So what they start doing is realizing, you don't freeze in Honduras. So maybe what we'll do is we'll start going down there to find produce, and they come across the idea of bananas. I don't know if you've ever been down that way. When my wife and I got married, we spent about a month on a Chiquita banana plantation in Changuinola in Amarante, 350,000 acre banana plantation. Absolutely amazing. This one wasn't that big, but still, they're bringing bananas in. So in 1910, they formed the Standard Fruit Company. These are guys that had nothing, arrived with nothing. It just goes to show the determination. And they start transporting bananas by sailing ship, by schooners. Of course, this guy, D'Antonio, is kind of a sharp cookie. He decides he's going to start investing in steamships. It's a straight shot, and you don't have to depend upon the wind. So he goes in that direction, and of course, steamships now are making that transition to fuel oil. So as a result, their business expands tremendously, okay? That's when they start looking around, because the Vaccaros are very successful businessmen. They're growing business. They're starting to constantly go trips back and forth, bringing bananas and other fruits and vegetables back and forth. They're bringing passengers to Central America. Their profits were such that they bought the Roosevelt Hotel. They then bought into the ice business. We used to open up an ice tray and having a bunch of ice from an ice maker. No, they used to have to get ice by coming down the street, and a guy would be singing and saying Ice Kings. In the medium of doing that, they're producing a lot of wealth, and D'Antonio looks around and says, you know what? Why don't we purchase this Chalmette Petroleum Company? A, we'll make money from the fact that they go there all the time and they're selling oil. Get involved by buying Chalmette Petroleum. They then would merge with Louisiana Oil Refining, a subsidiary of Invincible Oil, which belongs to Mr. E.R. Radcliffe of Shreveport. So they form a partnership, probably because they realize they don't know a whole lot about oil. It'd be good to get an oil man in there. Radcliffe becomes president, Felix Vaccaro becomes vice president, and in 1922, it's worth $1 million. That's some serious bucks back then. These young men have done quite well for themselves in a relatively short period of time. This is what the 1922 share of Invincible stock looked like. Bay Petroleum. Now, this is again, we go back and do a little history here. What's this all about? Some of you all might remember old Bay Petroleum. I know my father-in-law worked there at one time. This is Charles Ulrich Bay. This is kind of an interesting story. 1937, he founds Bay Petroleum. In 1944, he acquires the Chalmette refinery. Now look at the numbers here. I'm not going to accuse anybody of anything, but he pays $350,000 for the refinery plus inventory. The plant capacity has 7,500 barrels per day. He inherits a tax loss carryover of $235,000, which he applies to offset the losses by the end of the calendar year. I'm not an accountant. I'm not exactly sure how that works. But yeah, I believe if you gotta lose the money, that way you get the tax credit. But then if you're losing the money, if you're trying to lose money, it's kind of easy to do. And I don't know, I mean, I'm sure there's ways that you can lose money without really losing it. But anyway, so he ends up with this $235,000 tax credit that he's got to burn up, and he does it by doing a frenzied drilling enterprises in West Texas. Now, how much those losses were real or not, we don't know. But he's mitigating a lot of his initial expense. Then suddenly, 2 employees die within 18 months, and he gets $200,000 in insurance. Again, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but he's come out pretty good on his investment in Chalmette, to say the least. So he opens up the plant under the Chalmette Petroleum Company, and he will operate it until 1951. He renames it Bay Petroleum after that point. Some of y'all may remember that. This is what it looked like in 1940. This is in 1946. So it's really interesting, these slides, and I have to thank Elizabeth for providing me with these, because it really shows you the evolution of the physical facility itself. This is really amazing to look at. This is a control room. Those of you guys that worked there, can you imagine that? That's when you went out there physically and you turned the valves. Expansion. 2 major expansions of the crude and cracking units. 52, he completes a 5,500 barrel a day cracking unit. He's now producing 18,000 barrels per day of oil in refining. He's employing 1,100 workers. He's focused on safety. There's probably no portion of our daily work which our employers of various refiners are more enthusiastic about than their safety. Everybody wants to go home at the end of the day. You know, do what you can to make it a safe environment. And hats off, they've done a great job. The newly named Bay Petroleum Company remained a major employer throughout its history, and it'll stay in possession until 1955, when it's bought by the Tennessee Gas and Transmission Company. This is what it looked like in 1956. So he's got it all painted, everything's the same color. It's all cleaned up. I mean, it's a beautiful facility here. He's got his new wharfs out there. So this function, you see, there's nothing around back there too much. You know, it's kind of open land. Parish is starting to grow, though, because you can have 1956, but this time Kaiser was just pumping right along. Tenneco. Okay? This is Tenneco's share of stock. Henry Gardner Simmons, the Tennessee Gas and Transmission Company. He was in the pipeline business. He gets crossways with the federal government, and somehow he thought he was going to get a better deal, and the government shifted the game on him. He got really angry about that. He decides to start going into other businesses. So he purchases Bay Petroleum Company in 1953 and invests in his new company. In 56, he adds catalytic reforming units, which made it very competitive, tank storage, office buildings, rerun unit, vapor recovery system, and a bottleneck removal equipment. Some of that stuff I don't know what I'm saying. I'm sure those in the industry know. I'm not sure what bottleneck removable equipment really is. Catalytic reforming I'm familiar with. In 59 to 1960 is a major expansion. This facility is continually expanding. He replaced the 24,000 crude unit, which was 35,000 barrels per day. Catalytic converter is increased from 9,000 to 18,000. He also increases the oil storage and improves the wharf again. Totally modernizes the facility. This is what it looks like when he gets in. So you can see you've got this major expansion taking place, especially in storage. This is Kaiser back there, by the way. Tenneco. They now changed the name. Instead of Tennessee Transmission, it becomes a Tenneco Corporation, and it starts coordinating all these different enterprises. 61, it gets complete. 1965, they start doing more expansive work in here, and everything is upgraded. 1966, Tenneco takes possession of all the oil and gas, and Simmons is made chief executive officer of the new corporation called Tenneco. Also, Hurricane Betsy comes around here. Those of us remember that one. You know, this plant itself wasn't damaged, but being a good neighbor, they did what they could to help the community out as best they could. You know, that would be the same when Katrina. Chalmette refining was a tremendous help to a lot of people here. Other improvements were added to meet the demands. New regulations start coming in. You got Clean Air Acts, OSHA. All of a sudden, the industry now is coming under much more broader and tighter federal controls, and all of these things require a lot of money, a lot of investment, employees, infrastructure, things of that sort. So other mandates start coming in. Now we get into, this is not from here. This is an ortho tower for paracycline. We had a terrible accident. Those of you all remember 1976. It was August 12th when this accident occurred. 24 men were working in that tower, a 30-foot high ortho tower. From what I've been able to gather, talking to people who were there, and also the reading I was able to do, apparently what happened, you didn't have the connections you have now. Every connection is different. And one of the workers decided to hook up a compressed air line to help the guys blow out the equipment. He connected it to natural gas, and when the welder struck an arc, the tower blew. When it went, the tower struck his arch. 200 metal plates came crashing down in a sudden explosion. 11 men were killed. 10 were seriously injured. Those of you who know Dr. Tian referred, some of the victims were just blown apart. It was impossible to identify who they were. You know, the more you read into this event, the injuries were horrendous. This was the first and last time there was ever any incident like that in that facility. And it was tragic, and those kind of accidents can't happen again because you can't make those kind of changes. You can't, everything's got a different type of connection, so that doesn't happen anymore. Sadly, that's the way we learn. Production, 1979, when the Iranian Revolution took place. We all remember Khomeini. Remember Jimmy Carter saying, Iran's an island of tranquility in the sea of turmoil. About a month later, it became an island of turmoil when Khomeini took over. First thing he did was shut off the flow of oil. So all his sweet crew disappeared. We had to find someplace else to find it. Venezuela comes online. They have some of the largest oil reserves in the world. The trouble is it's dirty. It's called sour oil because it has a high sulfur content. Refineries had to change their way of doing things, the way they produced it. I don't understand the particulars of it, but I know it's pretty involved. You know, Chalmette refining took on the process of doing that. We're so close, right across the Gulf, we're able to get it in. This also coincided with Tenneco's shift from exploration. Now they're into production side. It's a different side of the oil industry completely. It's production and refining. Partnership was arranged between Venezuela and Tenneco. They work out a financial arrangement to start signing the contracts, to start bringing the crude in here. They make the changes at the refinery, and it continues profitably for a number of years. In fact, they lean on Venezuela, if I'm not mistaken. They do some pre-refining because the stuff was so bad. They wanted to have it pre-refined over there, so it was semi-refined and cleaned up when it was brought to us to continue the process. This is the refinery in 1979. This is in 1981. Look how it's expanded. Okay. Then we have a second accident. 1983, September 1st, 9:35 p.m. Workers were working around the tent when there was an explosion. Nobody to this day knows exactly what happened. Within a short time, the storage tank with 120,000 barrels of 6.5 million gallons of gasoline went up. The fire raged for 16 hours while Boots and Coots were contacted from Texas to come flying in here. They have a whole new system of foam that they were experimenting with. This is the first refinery fire that it was applied to. They had tankers of LPG. They moved back. And I want to go back here and show you something. I think this is the one that went. See that ball there? I believe that's propane, if somebody would know. I'm not sure if it's LPG, propane.
Probably butane.
Butane? Is butane? I remember I got a haircut after this fire. Now it's strange places. Bars are like hairdressers. You find everything there. And I had a fireman next to me. And he said, when they got on the scene, this is what they were worried about, because the fire was raging here, that this would go. And if that went, it would have been a disaster. So he says, we arrived, we pulled the fire engines as close as we could, so much so that the heat from the fire melted the paint, melted all the plastic taillights and all off the fire engines. And our job was to cool this thing down. He says, I was terrified. He says, because it was so hot, as we put the water on, we were afraid just the cold water might split it, and then we'd have a major problem. But then it was nothing but steam, constant steam. It was that hot, until eventually the water started flowing over the top. And once the water flowed, we knew we were safe. And he says, we spent our whole time constantly pouring water on that particular location. So that's what it was, to prevent the explosion. 3,300 people were evacuated. Only one worker died, and that was as a result when the incident was completely over. He was setting up an electrical circuitry, and somehow he got electrocuted. Okay? And short time, it burned itself out with the stuff. This is what fire looked like. I think you all may remember that. I remember it because I had a double window in my house and I decided to replace it with French doors. Just got the whole side of the house cut open when that happened. It's like, seriously? I might have to evacuate a piece of visqueen between me and the world. That was it. We haven't had any incidences since then, but those are part of our history. This is 1983, the new flare system was brought up. This is a major safety thing. Anything goes wrong, it gets diverted to the flare system and it burns it off, so you don't have any backup. Aftermath, following these unfortunate incidents, operated an incredibly safe, nearly accident-free operation. However, this left a scar on us. You still know, I was just talking to my wife, friends of ours who lost husbands in that blast. We're a small community. We all know each other. Time heals, and in 33 years, we've never had any incident, anything like that, okay? Tenneco made the repairs and continued moving on. This is the refinery in 1984. You can see how much bigger the refining side of it's got, and the storage side is getting packed in as well. Tenneco changes. What happens is Tenneco's got so much money coming in, now they're spending it on everything. They bought Newport News Dry Dock, packing companies, Country Land Companies, Steiger Tractor Company, about 22 other businesses. They're going crazy buying all this stuff. And of course, a lot of them aren't producing much. So as a result, they run themselves into some financial difficulties. And with the result of that, they got to start divesting themselves. So the board of directors decides they want to change, so they hire a new man named Michael Walsh. He comes in and starts making major changes, but while he's doing that, they're still expanding and improving and increasing the safety here at Chalmette Refinery. This is Michael Walsh. His improvements were simple. He cut the dividend by 90%, eliminated 90,000 jobs, sold 3 short-line railroads. What they were doing railroads, God only knows. Reduced capital spending, raised $512 million in new equity, and started throwing away the subsidiaries. He also decided to get away from the petroleum business and focus on some of the other assets they had. So in 1988, Tenneco falls victim. Walsh sold it for $3.3 billion, and as a result, the Mobil Corporation would come up with $650 million plus consideration of capital for just the Chalmette Refinery. It now becomes Mobil Oil. Within the stroke of a pen, Chalmette Refinery, Tenneco Refinery, and Chalmette becomes Mobil Refinery. Now we've got the flying horse. Remember those? Good old days. 17 cents a gallon, I believe. And, oh well, age and reminiscing. Mobil comes in 1911 is when it started. It was a spin-off of breaking up Standard Oil Corporation. Henry Clay Folger registers Mobil Oil. Later they changed it to Mobil. And in 1963, they adopted the logo of the flying horse. Throughout the 40s and 50s, they were the largest producer of gasoline. That's why they're interested in refineries, especially when they change from carburetors to fuel injection, because you need cleaner gas. Otherwise, it clogs the fuel injectors. And guess who's doing that? Mobil. Mobil comes up with super unleaded fuel in the 1980s. That booms things. So as a result, their industry starts growing. They move their headquarters to Fairfax. And in 1988, Chalmette Refinery becomes Mobil Refinery. So those of us remember the big sign up there. It opened as a sole entity in 1997. But then in 1997, they sold 50% to PDVSA, which is the Venezuelan company, and renamed the company Chalmette Refining LLC. Initially, it seemed like a great idea. It was a partnership made in heaven. They had all the oil in the world. We had the refinery. They had dirty oil. We had a refinery that could just take care of dirty oil. And Venezuela was an ally of the United States and had been for quite some time. Now you see the refinery here in 1987. You see the new office complex that's built down here. This is the training center. Chalmette Refining. Deal initially proved beneficial. Venezuela, as I said, possessed it. They had access to handle it. It was all great. They had the pre-refining facilities built. Everything was wonderful. And then suddenly this guy comes in. Hugo Chavez, a Marxist. He overthrows the government in a coup, and he establishes a Marxist dictatorship and starts trying to nationalize the industries. He was solidly anti-American, especially anti-Exxon. This is going to be important in a little bit. Relations then started souring just like their crude was. ExxonMobil. The Mobil logo would grace the gate for only 10 years. In 1999, news broke that Exxon Corporation and Mobil Corporation were going to merge. It required a lot of government permission and all this sort of stuff. $80 billion deal. And the old standard elements are coming back together again. And now it's interesting. The new Exxon Mobil eclipsed the economy, some of the largest oil-producing places in the world. November 1999, the Trade Commission approved the merger. Both companies then began cutting jobs, capital investments, because they were merging together, trying to get everything straight and cast off what they didn't need. They had a combined income of $193 billion, produced 2.5 million barrels a day, with 21 billion of oil in reserves. They are the big boy on the block. Market value of the company was $237.53 billion. It's big. Problem, Hugo hated Exxon. And that's when it started going bad. He gained power, started solid, altered course, most of the problems of Venezuela. He would seize Exxon assets, other corporate access as well from other foreign companies. If you have a place out there, he's taking it over. It's the old process of just taking over other people's land. They struck against him in 2003 because PDVSA was concerned. The managers and the workers there were concerned that he was going to bring his politics into the refinery. This was the golden goose. This was the moneymaker for all of Venezuela. So there was a coup against him. These people aligned with him. The coup did not work. That's the difference between a rebellion and a revolution. A rebellion fails, a revolution wins. This was a rebellion. It failed. As a result of the coup, he would prevail, he would take over the entire oil industry, and he'd begin purging people. And as a result, just as those people expected, corruption, purges of employees, political allies being hired, raiding the funds and the operating capital to pay for all of his ideas that he had all for reconstituting the structure of Venezuela, and even though they're in a partnership, is now forced to bear the burden of the cost of Chalmette refining. These were scary times for us here, though a lot of us didn't realize it. Because if you got a 50-50 partnership and you're bearing 100% of the expenses, it's not a happy relationship, okay? And that's what's taking place at this point. And that's when these gentlemen come in. Thank God for PBF. This is the refinery at night in a beautiful shot. And this is here the lawn. Another shot. Things have changed. Now, instead of a couple of dials on the wall, just about everything's handled this way. And now, if you'll find in the back, we have the PTEC program, which is process technology, and we have to take our hats off to Chalmette Refining that did that. Albert Stroik from Holland, he decided that instead of having all these people rushing these gates trying to find jobs, the best thing to do is to have a training facility where people could get certified. He insisted they have an associate's degree. And as a result, if they got their permits and they got their degrees, only then would he even consider looking at them for a job. It helped his company because he knew what he was getting, and it helps the students here. Students come here for the PTEC program. They can come to PTEC program in 2 years, graduate, and with overtime make twice what I make. That just goes to show you, how lucrative it is. It's a great program. We started off, I think, Dr. Warner said, I think we had like 16 to 18 students. We've got over 400 now. It's an amazing thing. But this is what it is. Back then, you just told to turn a valve. Nowadays, you got to learn the systems, how they work. You got to know the theory behind everything. If you go back there, if you ever take a tour, you really should. All the models they have, see-through models, you understand what a cracking tower is. These kids, when they come out, they know what's taking place inside of these vessels. They're not just following orders. Who is PBF? In 2008, it was a partnership of Petroplus Holding, Blackstone Group, and First Reserve. Each contributed $667 million. They spawned this new company, incorporated in 2011. Thomas O'Malley is the chairman. It's got a long history in the industry. These are our present owners. A company dedicated to purchasing and rebuilding failing refineries. Chalmette Refining was failing not because it wasn't a good refining, because it had a bad relationship between Exxon and Venezuela. It was troubled. They stepped in, it was a pearl. It was a great opportunity for them. They now have 5 refineries, Chalmette, Toledo, Delaware, Port of Paulsboro, and understand they just picked up the Torrance refinery. They supply unbranded gasoline, lubricants, fuel oil, heating oil, and jet fuel. is not shy about investing to improve profits and production. And from what I gather, they're heavily involved in investing right now to kick that refinery up to the next level of both production and safety. Having acquired Chalmette, it became one of the largest refining concerns in the nation. Chalmette Refining came under PBF control. They purchased it for $320 million from Exxon and PDVSA. It's now completely owned without burden with this crazy partnership. Venezuelan politics is no longer part of our equation. Refinery employs 530 employees directly with 500 contract workers, so you're still running at somewhere just under 1,100 workers. And if there's a turnaround, it's a lot bigger than that. Production capacity is 189,000 barrels a day. Come a long way from 10, hasn't it? Acquisition will increase PBF's total capacity to 725 barrels a day. Now covers 400 acres of land, and it continues to promise. I've had the opportunity to work with both Elizabeth and Dorothy. They're still fully engaged in the commitments that all of them, Mobil, Exxon, Chalmette Refining, and now PBF have made to the community. They participate in a lot, and I'll show you in a second. It's been good neighbors. Contributions, we've got 1,000 full-time workers with the money they bring in, people that are local businesses going through vast sums of money. The PTEC program here at NHS, has helped the college survive. After Katrina, there were people that were looking at pulling the plug on this place. Thank God Dr. Warner stood up to keep it open, and Albert Strunk, because they had set the whole PTEC program up and it went completely underwater. And Albert Strunk pulled this thing together and shipped a lot of the equipment off to Houston. That was the models and everything, had it refabricated and brought it back here. He forged partnerships with a lot of other refineries out there and other businesses. It's not, you got Air Products, you got Folgers Coffee, anything that's PTEC. It's not refining, it's process technology. It's all about process. They brought that in. $288,000 a year in United Way, over $300,000 they give to different charities. Leadership, they hold positions on a variety of boards in different charities and different organizations. Taxes, $7.5 million in property taxes, which is 16% of the total income for the parish. If this refinery had closed because of the deal with Venezuela, can you imagine what would have happened to the police department, the school system, into everything? Can't lose it. Take 16% out of your budget and see if you can pay your bills. So this was very important. So conclusions. Ta-da, I actually got there. History of refineries reflected really the history of oil in America and really the history of oil in the world. The first refineries merely produced kerosene to replace whale oil. After that, it was used for lighting. It's in ships and automobiles and airplanes and jets and you name it. Like I said, 1930s, the British came up with polyester resins, which is used in fiberglass. Now in carbon fiber itself. Where do you think the carbon comes from? It's just amazing the things that we're using oil for these days. Throughout the evolution, the refinery here in Chalmette adjusted to the realities, produced new and better products, and contributed to the economy directly through employment and taxes and indirectly through continued association and work with the local community. So the history of Chalmette Refinery is a major contributor to the history and economic evolution of St. Bernard Parish as a transition from an agricultural community to an industrial community. So there's a nice shot through the Pakenham Oaks. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jerry Forstel, plant manager of PBF. Thank you so much.
My head is spinning with all those stats and facts and whatnot. That was really amazing. I learned so much by just listening to what you had to say there. A couple of quick updates on the refinery. We're actually up to about 1,200 employees right now, if you add the contractors, maybe even 1,250 on some days. This is a function of the fact that the company at PBF is heavily investing in the refinery. Probably more so than we invested in probably the last decade at the site. I like to look at that as one man's treasure is another man's trash kind of thing. PBF bought this refinery, you saw the number there, for $322 million. Which in today's day and age is a bargain for buying a refinery. Having worked for Shell Oil Company for about 30 years, I know how much a refinery like this one would cost to build. We built one in Port Arthur, Texas in 2011, and that particular refinery was $10.3 billion built grassroots, just to give you an idea. This was a little bit smaller than that one, but you can think about it in terms of we probably bought this refinery for a dime on a dollar of what the true value of the refinery was. So because of that, and as Ron said, there was such a poor relationship between ExxonMobil and the Venezuelans, we've been able to parlay some real good opportunities into some real investments in the refinery, and we have a lot of big ideas for the refinery going forward. A couple of other points I'll make. Dr. Warner here, we just recently hired 40 process operators at the site. We're going through what we call basic operator training right now. Of the 40, approximately a third have either graduated from Nunez or been part of it at some point in time. So we get a lot of our people from Nunez. And I would also say, and I've said this to a few at the refinery, that it is much harder to be hired as a refinery operator or process technician than it is to be hired as an engineer. And I'm an engineer, so I could say that. To give you an idea, we put an ad in the paper basically asking for operators, and we got 1,000 applicants. And it's about a 6-month process by the time you go through applying for a job like that and getting through about 5 or 6 processes, including face-to-face interviews, written tests, demonstration tests. And so the 40 people that we have training right now are unbelievably qualified, and we're looking forward to having them as part of our fabric. Amazing presentation. I tell you what, as somebody that, I'm not from the local area, I'm not from St. Bernard Parish, I've sort of adopted it, or it's adopted me, I'm not sure which it is. But I've really, really loved coming here, and been here only a year, and I feel like a real part of the family, and just that a year. My wife and I often talk about how lucky we were to kind of have the right set of circumstances happen when we were able to get the job. I retired from Shell after about 30 years, to give you an idea. Shell's a great company, but there's nothing like working in St. Bernard Parish, and in particular the Chalmette refinery. We're extremely happy to be here. We've got great people. We have great work processes. A lot of that we inherited from ExxonMobil. They had a lot of things on the ball. But one thing we did notice is that the refinery needed a little tender love and care. And we are investing about approximately 5 times the amount of money per year that ExxonMobil had invested. So we see a very bright future. Obviously, we wouldn't be investing that kind of money if we didn't think there was a good future in the refinery. And the sky's the limit. Well, for those of you that are here, how many of you are retirees from the site? Any retirees from out here? 2 or 3? I tell you what, you'll be proud of it. So I hope you come back to visit us. We have a really good working relationship with our community. We have 2 community advisory committees that we work with. Extremely love these people. They're very easy to work with. They have a lot of good things. We have our United Way campaign going on right now. Elizabeth made sure I said that. Our United Way campaign. We do a lot. We do a lot in the community, and the community does a lot for us. So it's a real strong thing we believe in. And so if
you don't process any gases like hydrazine for spaceships and all, for guides on spaceships?
No, we don't do that. We do make jet fuel, okay, but we don't.
High-test diesel.
Yeah, high-test diesel. Our main products are gasoline these days and ultra-low sulfur diesel. But as Ron was saying, we don't let any molecule in that barrel of crude oil go to waste, including the sulfur, including the coke. We basically process it all. But our products, we make about 60% gasoline. Of that crude barrel, about 60% of it turns into gasoline. And naturally occurring, it's about 5%. So you can imagine what you have to do to get that 5% into 60%. So it's quite an elaborate process, sir.
How is the raw product brought into the facility?
Yeah.
How is the finished product brought out?
Yes. The raw products come in 2 forms. Mostly, well, I'd say about half of it comes via ship, and a lot of it still is with the Venezuelans. We still have a deal with their crude oil. Because this plant, as you might have picked up, was sort of specifically designed to handle the Venezuelan crudes, which are very sour, high sulfur, and heavy, very viscous crudes. So about half of it, maybe a little bit more, comes through ships. The other half comes via pipeline. And in particular pipeline, we have 2 or 3 pipelines here. A lot of the rest of the crude comes from the Gulf of Mexico into something called the Loop, or this KLM pipeline. As far as going out, we sell about 15,000 barrels a day in our truck rack right there on the premises. And the rest, probably about 2/3 of it goes out pipeline, up into the Colonial Pipeline, sold locally and then all the way up to the East Coast. And then occasionally we send ships to South America of products, gasoline and diesel. So really basically all forms of transportation we employ at the refinery.
Local, what percent of your crude is locally produced, meaning Louisiana specifically?
Yeah, good question. We have about 4 or 5 different grades of local oil that we run. HLS, LLS, SLI, I could just give you all kinds of acronyms. Mars is another crude. About 40% is Louisiana or Texas-based crudes. But we get it from everywhere, right? We get crudes from South America, we get them from Saudi Arabia, we get them from Canada, we get them from, Colombia. If you name the place, we get it. But about 1/3 to maybe 40% comes from Louisiana. We call those the light sweet grades. Okay? Light meaning relatively light material, sweet meaning lack of sulfur. It makes it easier to process.
So of all the refineries in the United States, is the Chalmette refinery the largest?
No, it's not the largest. I would say it's probably in the top 10% in terms of the size of the refinery. The one I built, or I was part of building in Port Arthur, Texas, is actually the biggest. That refinery processes about 675,000 barrels a day, to give you an idea. We do about 189,000, as you heard. So it's a pretty good size, but it's not the biggest. It is one that can handle the most difficult crudes, though. So it takes, I'll say, the lowest value crudes and makes the highest value products. So it's what's known as a high conversion refinery, which makes it profitable.
Can we probably take a tour of the facility?
Sure, absolutely. We do tours pretty regularly. I would ask you to get with, do you know Elizabeth? We need, Elizabeth, stand up so everybody can see who you are.
Yeah.
And if you set up with Elizabeth, come to our community advisory committee. We just did a tour with the CAC about a month ago. It is a pretty impressive place. And so yes, we'd be happy
Will
to
you give us
host.
a personal tour?
I'm sorry, what?
Will you give us a tour?
Yeah, I do it. I do it myself lots of times. We have shift superintendents that also do it. But I did the last 2 that we did. One was a community group, and the other was a list of our controllers across the company, our finance people. That was just last week we did one, right, Elizabeth? It was good. They enjoyed it. It is pretty, there's a lot of history at the site, 100 years plus. We're on year 101, and it's been a great relationship with the community.